Thank you for having me here. So my name is Magda, and today I will talk about common cloud mistakes. Since you have your schedule packed, I hope you, with of course sessions, I hope you are full of energy and eager to dive into the cloud. So fingers crossed. So there are plenty of challenges when it comes to the cloud. And last time I was working on this presentation, I needed to narrow down the speech. I wanted to put so many mistakes, and the time constraint showed that it was kind of impossible. So let's hope I learned my lessons from the last presentation. So let's move forward. And yeah, it's a great pity I couldn't be here with you today and to join you in person in Netherlands. When Rebecca contacted me regarding this presentation, I was really honored and happy that I can share my experiences with you. Unfortunately, due to my private matters, my travel is a bit limited. And currently I'm working on my house constructions, as you can see on the screen. And there's plenty of work regarding automation stuff, planning, integrating it later on. So just a few pictures what I'm dealing with, but since it's not the part of today's presentation, even though there are some mistakes already made, I will move forward. So a bit about what I will cover today. So I will do a short introduction about myself and how my cloud journey has begun. Also, I will uncover a bit about cloud mistakes, provide some examples, recommendations on how to avoid or overcome them. And last but not least, I will provide also some insights about next steps. So a bit about my cloud journey and how it began. As you already heard, I haven't directly started in IT. I started in finance. And during studying financial engineering, I discovered that I was a bit more interested in IT, doing some kind of automation of finances. It really kind of brought my attention. So my first job in IT started in 2008, and it was in help desk. Later this year, the same year, I decided to start my second master's in information technology, and it was in 2009. And my first cloud encounter was in 2011. I started reading about this, but basically learning started in 2013. And later next year, I started my first cloud-related project, which was in 2014. And at the end of the year, I also passed my first certification. It was implementing Microsoft Azure infrastructure solutions. In 2015, I started working as an architect for some architecture roles. It was mostly infrastructure architecture. And in 2016, I landed on my first cloud architect role. And as you've already heard, also I've written the book, Mind the Gap: Most Common Cloud Mistakes, and this was published in 2014. And I just provide for information about challenges and pitfalls in the public cloud. In the upper right corner, there is also a QR to the book if you want more insights. Throughout my years in IT, I've worked in multiple roles from engineering, team leadership, and architecture. And when I started with the cloud, the number of available services back then were significantly lower to what we can observe right now. It looked like more VM rental service, VM virtual machines, disk storages, some application services, and also the automation that we currently know and are accustomed to differed. And of course, as you may deduct, with lower number of services back then came lower number of mistakes. And currently, cloud portfolio consists of large number of cloud services with various designation and purpose. And this influences the greater number of mistakes, which can be committed due to dependencies or intricacies. And yeah, this is why we have today's talk. So about common cloud mistakes. So let's move further. So right now, a short spoiler. Definitely, I won't be able to cover all mistakes. Firstly, because we do not know what mistakes are committed by people while we are having this talk. And secondly, we are of course limited by time. I will share mistakes, as you can see here, from security, network, tagging, monitoring, and cloud identity. There are also mistakes in some other areas like cloud platform in general, cloud platform services, and naming convention. But yeah, for this part, I thought I wasn't able to find sufficient time in the slot. So let's move further. The first mistake I will cover is related to orphaned resources in cloud environment. And basically, abandoning cloud resources poses both cost and security risk. It is unfortunately more common issue than in the cloud environment, especially that you can imagine. And this negligence occurs across various expertise levels. One possible reason for this to be happening is the ease and speed with which new resources can be provisioned. Unlike in on-premises environments where ordering and provisioning processes can be time-consuming, cloud resources are just few clicks or lines of code away from you. And this unaddressed abandonment leads to excessive costs. And let's imagine the scenario where you have multiple teams, each team leaving the resources running. And this cost can escalate pretty quickly. And later on, additional problems are with removing these resources, especially over the time, how you find person who is responsible for certain resource in order to give a consent or confirmation that it can be kind of deleted or removed from environment. And of course, how long would it take to find out if there is no kind of data which are crucial or any information which are being still in use. And this orphan resources poses both risks, as I mentioned. It's cost and security related, but this controlling spending, for example, can help you in detecting, even in some cases, breaches. And if you notice that, let's assume certain unexpected costs increase, it may point you into identifying that something kind of unordinary is happening. Also a bit more on potential consequences of this abandonment or uncontrolled resources, I will show in the end of a presentation. And as you are going through the airport, or probably you are traveling here, you may notice some signs of not leaving your luggage unattended. Next time you are working with a cloud, think about kind of this sign, but change a bit its context. So when you are deploying resources, so for your budget and security sakes, do not leave your cloud resources unattended. So just some more insights in regards to maybe some statistics. According to Andot report, nearly 50% of cloud-based businesses struggle to control the cloud costs. And in 54% of the cases, cloud waste stems from a lack of visibility into cloud environment. So identifying factors for that are driving your cloud costs and identify maybe some optimization, ensuring that your cloud and infrastructure is deployed in optimized manner, and also having clear understanding of what you are being charged of really helps to take account for your resources in the cloud. As a remediation, I can recommend, of course, few points. Monitor your cloud spending. So ensure you are controlling your expenses in the cloud to be able, for example, to detect anomalies, what is happening, but also how it is impacting your budgets. And cloud providers have separate services that show you, for example, what cost your services have generated, and also what is the forecast even of your costs. And when talking about monitoring, I also will add the part of alerting, because as memory is good but short, you can configure also your alerts to get notified when certain threshold is being exceeded. Additional recommendation would be a regular ownership review. So remember that having a person responsible for certain resources adds in keeping your cost under control. And this helps not only in ensuring that resources are deleted after a certain period of a time, but also that this person knows what is happening with these resources or how they are being used. And this kind of, for example, when you have kind of proof of concept period, but for example, someone forgotten the resources, this responsible person may take, for example, this responsible person may be on top of activities and take care of proper kind of deletion and sanitization of this environment. And that's why it's so important to have this person to be kind of nominated. Moving further in regards to the reviews, take care also of offboarding and onboarding process. So basically GML, so joiners, leavers, movers. So include departmental transfers and offboarding mechanisms. So to ensure that resources ownership or this accountability is properly managed. So remember that people tend to change their roles, get promoted, and therefore it's really worth to ensure to keep the person responsible for resources, this responsible person, so this information about basically this person to keep it up to date, to follow this organization changes. And last but not least, remediation for this abandonment is prepare proper mechanism for decommissioning. So this can be done even automatically. So for example, you can apply the tax with the end of the date, with the end date for the resources, and some automation can take care of deletion of the resources at this proper date. Or during, for example, or using a sandbox environment, you can have a proper mechanism to deleting the resources at the end of a business day or every month, just to ensure that the costs aren't exaggerating your budgets. And by this proper mechanism, think also of such a case that not always people who are working with resources may have a proper knowledge. So you may need to so have kind of this knowledge about how to delete these resources, who to refer to. So it's really worth to ensure that you have a certain way how to cure this. Going to the next mistake, it's related to overcomplicated tags. I've mentioned briefly tag usage with orphaned resources, but this kind of overcomplication is another issue. First of all, just to tell a bit about what is tag, just in case, this is a pair key name and key value. And you can treat this or think about this as a kind of label you append to your resource. And basically, it's containing certain metadata about the resource that can aid as additional information about the resource, trigger automation, as you learned before, one of the solution, or helps even for auditing purposes. So overcomplication of attacks is common issue, and it is tied to excessive usage of attacks, requiring to provide a long kind of not really transparent content or some special schemas or even combination of lower uppercase and plenty of kind of special characters. And remembering to accurately fill these lengthy inputs can lead to deviation from standards, hindering data analysis and even generating the typos. And you should remember that about the tags, in order for it to bring value, it has to kind of follow a certain standard. It's just a simple text. So this overcomplication can lead to, for example, lack of uniformity. So where multiple teams create their own variations of attacks, causing inconsistencies, or resources are tagged incorrectly, leading to some security or operational problems. So it may impact your security operations. So where certain policies or auditing aspects is bound to accuracy in the tags, or it may affect your reporting, for example, in the cost area, when you are aggregating the resources for the analysis purpose, or kind of charge or recharge the cost to proper department, or even to detect kind of any optimization or any anomalies having on or happening in your environment. And it may also have a negative effect on your kind of automation and security. So when the tags are hard to interpret, you may have kind of issues to kind of identify what is really this with this resource, or this additional information may kind of cloud your judgment about this resource. And I have, for one example, with kind of how with wrong tags, basically. So as you can see here, you have a backup tag. And basically here is complete lack of standardization and uniformity across the tag name and even kind of tag value. So tag value doesn't have to be kind of always the same, but at least it has to stick to certain kind of setup. And this kind of backup, you do not know basically what is happening in here, whether the resources are being backed up or the backup was just kind of implemented, whether it should be executed, or if any automation is here, and even setting up any automation based on this backup will require a lengthy dictionary to be set up. And there is the worst part: you do not know what kind of another ideas with the names here people will devise. So this is kind of another issues that are encountered. So in order to kind of approach it properly, it should have kind of one tag name to kind of aggregate the values, and the values may vary, of course, but at least it should be kind of a certain structure in order to kind of identify what is happening and be more transparent. So what about remediation? First, I really recommend to adhere to the rule, principle: keep it simple, stupid. So avoid overcomplicating tags and include their essential information. So you can always expand it as needed. And these overlay tags really pose challenges to kind of automation, to aggregation, and also when talking about the tags, for example, in Azure, it's up to 50 tags that you can append to your resources. In some cases, it may be less, but in general, up to 50 resources. And to be frank, I really rarely seen usage of all these tags. So in most cases, it was kind of a couple of them, which were used as more or less standard setup. And it's about kind of not adding also additional or adding additional requirement on people, so expecting them to really pre-fill all these tags when they are not being used, because it's just also asking for another problems in environment. So keep it simple, stupid is adhering not only to the number of tags, but also to adding simplicity into the content. Implement automated checks for tags consistency. So ensuring, for example, that no empty tags remain in environment, because not fully kind of implemented tag is also not bringing any value, but still is kind of maybe an ask for a problem. And it's not about kind of asking or requesting to provide really large number of tags, but about maybe selecting this kind of mandatory one, these crucial tags that are really required to keep safety in your environment, keep healthiness in your environment. And this these automated checks can be either in a form of report that someone will kind of review, or even you go one step further. So you can use, let's assume, policies to check if your tags have been deployed and just auditing the environment, whether these mandatory ones are included. You can just, if you see that teams are struggling with adding the tags, you can even add, for example, the inheritance rule. So add the policy which helps inherit tag from the parent resource. Or one step further, which is kind of tricky, you can prevent creating resources if no kind of automated tags are being implemented. However, this deny role, so this deny option, has of course some downsides, especially when you are facing some issues or kind of urgent matters to taking care of environment. So it should be used wisely. And last but not least, as remediation steps, having clear tagging documentation is really helping to ensure that teams are uh, filling this inputs properly and are understanding what is expected. So this documentation is not only about providing the tag names and values, but also include the format rules and make sure that limitations are also appended, and also to prevent some confusions why or what tags are really mandatory to pre-fill. And do not, as I mentioned, do not try to use at first all the tags, because you do not know what other matters are to be attended to. And later on, it may be that you will need additional tags, and in case you will use them all, there is nothing kind of more left for you for another kind of automation or another or additional setups. So we talked about the tax and about the cost, and as you've heard, it both referred to some security issues which are related. And yep, these all areas are tied together. Even though I grouped them into certain maybe areas or pillars, it doesn't mean that it's kind of 0-1. And when something is kind of connected or kind of anchored to one area, it doesn't mean that it's not kind of bound or kind of related to another. So this time, I will share a bit more about security mistakes. So what can go wrong here? As we observe security breaches and other kind of security related issue, I will focus on lax security. So what are the key factors? So shared responsibility model misunderstanding. So assuming that cloud service providers will handle all security aspects without understanding that there is a shared responsibility model. And this can lead to gaps in protection. So cloud service provider doesn't take care of every aspect. There is it is to a certain extent, so they are responsible for the platform, but not for every aspect. You are deploying your application and other kind of objects or services in the cloud, and you need to also ensure that it is properly kind of anchored, properly integrated, and properly secured according to your restrictions. Another aspect is weak authentication, for example, reliance on weak passwords or a lack of multi-factor authentication, or even failure to kind of updating your credentials, and this can leave your resources vulnerable. And also this is down to misconfigurations, so incorrectly configured security settings or kind of overlooking these basic security measures can also like improper access controls or open ports or unsecured storage buckets, as you will also learn later at this kind of summary, can have consequences. So it can lead to malfunctions of your system. So for example, you can accidentally block ports which are necessary and for, let's assume, performing your backups, and the backup won't be kind of executed properly. You can experience some disruptions in your system due to poorly implemented network rules, so not well thought through or not well kind of covered, or security policies can be kind of affected, or your systems may not communicate with each other properly. So you want, let's assume, a private kind of communication, but it is that some of your systems are kind of public and it cannot communicate, cannot be integrated into your network due to a certain tier that you have selected. And the worst part of it is unfortunately security breach. And you will learn more at the end how this negligence in security can leave the door open for malicious actors. So as a remediation, establish a sensible level of security. And it is important to provide a baseline pattern that everyone must follow. And with underestimating the situation with security, it can leave your data vulnerable and basically open the door for any malicious activities. And just to mention this baseline pattern, it has to be such that applies for every resource. Of course, you can go one step higher. It's not like this that every resource are required to follow really stringent rules. So you can ensure that there is this level of security that you expect for every resource, from every resource to be followed. And later on, just apply the differentiators in the areas that are really required to be kind of more secure, more strict. Also, collect your feedback. So consult the teams and collect information from people who are working with certain solutions. So having the hands-on experience with security rules, and you can see during some work some inconsistency and gaps. Therefore, ensure that you have proper channel to listen to recommendations and have a proper mechanism also to apply them. Of course, mentioning about collecting feedback sounds a bit like cliche, but during one of my project engagements, I was working partially in engineering and architecture team and partially in the security. What I observed in engineering teams, that one of my colleagues noticed a certain security issue and flaws with a system he was working on. But unfortunately, he didn't have direct communication channel to security team, and he didn't know how to report this issue. And it caused a predicament because there was a gap in security, and security didn't know about this. But it wasn't difficult to remedy it, but due to his kind of lack of elevated permissions, he couldn't do so. So fortunately, I was able to pass this message to security and ask them to take proper actions. And they were really unaware that something out of ordinary is happening. So that's why this communication is really important. And of course, with a smaller environment, smaller scale, it's easier to see it through. However, in especially kind of big enterprises, the issue is how to, you have thousands of systems, tens of thousands of various services. It's really hard to be on top of every kind of relation, every intricacy with a system and knowing it all. It's impossible. So that's why this kind of collaboration and communication is really crucial and comes to the picture. Last remediation for these security flaws is implement security control mechanism. So having security documented, of course, is important, but it's equally important to establishing a proper mechanism to verify if a countermeasures are being implemented. So for example, through policy or security monitoring. So it helps you to maintain a secure and well-governed environment, and also reducing the risk of human error. And one thing to mention, it's not about bad intentions of people, but we are only people and we tend to make mistakes. So it's about kind of trust but verify. So we talked a bit about also problems due to security with, for example, misconfigured ports. So right now, I would like to highlight some aspects regarding network, and basically it's regarding to forgetting cloud network specifics. And this stems from inadequate understanding of network intricacies, which are really specific for a cloud platform. So each cloud service providers operates differently, and this may affect your cloud environment, your architecture. And managed networking is really fundamental feature, but cloud service provider specific nuances can limit your manageability and functionality. So while of course workarounds exist on unsupported methods, the risk is that your service may be unavailable and may experience some downtime. So here are some typical pitfalls to watch for. So one example is network rules. So these rules are being implemented differently for service providers. So even though service provider just have the same kind of network foundation, the way they are implementing their solution differs. So for example, in Azure, these rules are stateful. However, in AWS, these network rules are being set up stateless, and ensure to understand, for example, these distinctions, because it may occur that during the network or after deploying your application, when network is provisioned, your application, for example, couldn't communicate properly because it doesn't, for example, receive some request. IP addressing is another aspect. So there is kind of some uniqueness in IP addressing traits. So for instance, in Microsoft Azure, it Microsoft reserves 5 addresses for each subnet, and it may affect your network planning. So in case you will have your address range, which has, for example, too little addresses left due to this deduction, it may occur that you are not able to facilitate properly network for all resources that are in this network. So also, when we are talking about IP addressing, there are some special IPs reserved and required for service provider to, for example, have a proper log collection set or performance, and you need to ensure that your subnets are, for example, allowing a certain traffic or certain dynamic IP addresses. So there are some defined IP address range which can be used. So it's not like this that you can just select whatever you would like. And there are also some minimum and maximum masks per subnet, or even predefined subnet sizes and names, like for example for Azure Bastion, which you need to implement to the letter, because otherwise this service won't work properly. Next aspect is, for example, IPv6, while cloud providers mentioned that they support IPv6, not all services for your application may be IPv6 ready. And also be aware that even though IPv6 may be supported, the cloud platform is based on IPv4. So even though using this IPv6, you may still need this IPv4 to be also added. Last point, just to mention, and which is also often forgotten, I believe recently during the build and during conferences from Microsoft, it was also mentioned that hybrid first. So I often observe working with multiple projects, I observe that most common cloud setup is not kind of cloud only, but it's kind of a combination. So it's mostly hybrid. So on-premise with cloud service provider, or multi-cloud with on-premise environment. So Azure, AWS, or Azure, Oracle, or GCP, AWS, and on-premise. So not all resources can be moved from on-premise to the cloud due to certain limitations or restrictions or regulatory expectations or requirements. So you need also to ensure that you have reliable integration, network integration with on-premise. And this can be tools like Express Route from Azure, or Direct Connect from AWS, or even going further, third-party SD-WAN solutions. And you need to just figure out and ensure that it's being incorporated. So what are the consequences here? So of course, no surprise here, I believe. So your systems may not work properly, so malfunctions in your system. So it won't communicate some of your systems. I mentioned lack of IP address, sufficient number of IP addresses, or misconfigurations. So as I mentioned with the rule, which is stateless versus stateful, you are not setting something properly, you're not allowing IP address to pass through, and even security breaches. So in case you are not properly kind of applying zero trust or defense in depth kind of approach and allow for lateral movement, or not properly protecting your environment, this is when security breaches can also occur, or you are allowing someone to sniff around your environment. So regarding recommendations, so of course, this similar to tagging, having a clear guidelines will help reducing the mistakes. So it also the part of sharing the information about what restrictions are to be kind of followed. Just imagine the situation where you have critical application. You have a certain architecture patterns, but they haven't been tested or checked against limitations. And you need to ensure that you have secure and private connection between your database and application. You assumed that this private connection is standard per service, so allowed, and you've chosen the database, but you stumble upon limitation, which is not being able to use this private connection. So let's assume private endpoint, because some of your resources, like for example, web app, are in such tier that it is not allowing your application to communicate privately and be kind of network integrated. So right now you are in predicament to redesign your application, or or how to incorporate it into the guidelines. So for this, having kind of clear network guidelines and also combining it with building knowledge around cloud specific, which is kind of next remediation. So it's really where you can help to stay on top of activities. Cloud is developing really fast, so things tend to change. Of course, it's not like this that there is evolution every corner and every day, but things tend to change. So some limitations are revoked or maybe become more stringent. And building a knowledge and cultivating a certain habits like trust but verify in order to check if the solution is feasible before kind of implementing it fully on production, and having open communication channels with the teams helps you to leverage the situation and be able to properly approach the topic. So the next part, also partially mentioned regarding monitoring, I will mention here the mistake regarding alerts set incorrectly and alerts overload. So misconfigured alerts may fail to notify you during critical incidents, malfunctions, or disasters, and it may kind of lead to missed opportunities for example, prompt action. This can result in false positive. So when incorrect patterns or input parameters are trigger unnecessary alerts, and it may even divert your team's attention or causing to chase, for example, a non-existent issue. So consider a scenario where you have multiple databases supporting your web applications in the cloud, and you schedule a backup, and these are performed every 8 hours. Since your data loss cannot be more than 8 hours, you set up alerts to notify the team about every completion of backup. While this approach may seem reasonable, it can quickly become overwhelming. Just imagine the sheer number of notifications every time the database is being successfully backed up, and it can be overwhelming for the teams. And in the event of backup issue, let's assume you have hundreds of databases and just one hasn't finished the backup, you may not notice that certain notification hasn't executed, hasn't kind of occurred or properly finished. So this scenario emphasizes the sense of straightforward notifications and delivering also the intended message directly. Here, this you can see that are wrong kind of set parameters, input parameters. So instead of informing about kind of correct backup, maybe it's worth to inform that something kind of didn't go according to the plans. You may say, okay, we can check the databases. Yeah, you can, but why should you do this? First of all, you have kind of automation mechanisms, and secondly, yeah, don't you want to invest more time in things that are kind of more crucial, and probably it's not the only task you have, so you may be juggling also with numerous activities throughout the day. So really thoughtful crafted alerts serve really as valuable triggers, and it can allow to refocus the attention on some other priority matters. Another aspect is related to alerts overload, and this is combined. And in case the teams are overloaded with kind of a messages, their focus can simply drift away and causing to ignore crucial messages. So just to amend a bit the previous example where the information was only on the properly executed backup, let's change it around and let's change these input parameters to when backup isn't executed properly. However, you may just stumble upon the situation where your backups are failing due to maybe a certain kind of upgrade in the system, some incompatibilities, and your backups, so your 100 databases are failing, and you're receiving also 100 alerts that backups are not being executed, or maybe not all databases, but let's assume not 100, but 90 alerts, so still quite a number. And it may be that also you may kind of miss some of the database issues or with a backup, let's assume, because you just missed one of the messages. So here also come to attention, so how many these alerts are being occurred, and also is the information transparent or more straightforward, and how yeah, to maybe also avoid such large number of messages. Here kind of correlation can be a key, just not to receive 90 cases, but maybe it would be better to receive one alert that there is the issue general with backup, with a list of all the kind of machines or services that are affected, just simply to avoid being kind of flooded with messages which can kind of cloud your judgment. So how to remedy the issues with alert? So ensure that alerts are clear and actionable and consisting of meaningful, kind of and immediate action. So try to work smart, not hard. And alerts should not be like your VM is malfunctioning, because I see some flaws in this. So basically, it's great, but to get notification about this, but many questions are raising. So which VM, which environment, what is causing this state, why this alert was even triggered. So it should be more transparent, more straightforward, so that someone can take the immediate action. And also avoid alert fatigue. So prioritize relevant alerts to prevent kind of overload. Effective correlation techniques, as I mentioned, you can help to consolidate message and tell exactly what you need to know. And you don't know, you don't want your teams to get overwhelmed with alerts, because after some time people can keep ignoring them, and then the situation when the urgent situation come, probably the proper action won't be taken, because simply people will stop reacting after some time. And the last mistake, which I cover today, is also related to cloud, of course, but it's related to mismanagement of cloud roles and this privilege roles. So mishandling these roles can expose your organization to severe risk. And it's not that only privilege roles are risky. So basically also protecting regular roles is important. However, with privileged roles, we are talking about more rights and more permissions. So what are the key issues that can be identified here? So definitely lack of proper monitoring, and this prevents you from having insights into some anomalous activities. Also, lack of regular access review can lead to leaving users with permissions that should be, for example, revoked. So governance ensures roles align with recommendations and best practices, especially when new rules are introduced. So managing roles actively prevents the complexity from spiraling out of control, and implementing some automation rules can really simplify the process and reduce also the manual effort. And giving users too much permissions, oftentimes more permissions that are required for doing the job, can kind of cause some issues. And don't get me wrong, it's not about making it hard for people to execute and doing their or fulfilling their daily duties. But let's imagine that you are responsible for developing the application, but you have received a privileged role on the cloud environment, and you can create users, grant permissions, etc. So more than you need. And presumably having this more permission is tempting, and this temporary happiness can quickly transform into bitterness, because you may be requested to perform actions which are outside your regular scope of responsibilities. And also another aspect is it may lead to even some mistakes. So the consequences of the negligence in privilege roles can, for example, be impairment of JML, so this joiner levers movers process. So picture a person who works in IT, in IT in one organization for 10, 20 years. It's nothing impossible. And after this time, this person most probably changed the role a few times, including getting some promotions. And since, for example, the access review is not properly taken care of, this person, after working, let's assume, as kind of identity administrator, network administrator, DB administrator, and right now maybe manager or product manager of some application, it may occur that this person has more privilege than other people in the organization, since this person went through many roles. So it can this kind of permissions can generate some issues, because this person is no longer responsible for IAM, and having much permission definitely can aid a lateral movement. So just imagine this person, which is detached from administration, having kind of many privileges. Imagine that this person's his environment identity is being compromised. So it's really easy to move around environment and cause lots of damage. And last but not least, it's also kind of accidental mismanagement. So since this person holds a managerial position, may probably have different duties than previously when doing the administration work. And since this person may be not so much into right now doing the administrative work, some limitations in the context may come to the picture, which may cause that in case this person while doing some execution, some kind of misconfigurations or kind of activities which may affect environment may come to the picture. So how to avoid this or remedy it? So strike the right balance between security and usability. And as you've heard this example about this long-time employee, it's really easy to overlook the permissions management, some access reviews, and sometimes people tend to select the shortcuts in granting, for example, too high privilege to make it easier for people to execute their duties. However, this can be a start for a trouble. So as remediation, ensure to incorporate processes properly to manage your privileges and also to stay vigilant. So it's not about, as I mentioned, not giving people permissions to work and to execute their duties, but to ensure that sufficient permissions are being given so people can easily fulfill their duties, but they the number or scope of permissions is not being exaggerated. And also monitor privileged roles. So it is worth to have monitoring in place to detect any anomalies. So we talked about these privileged identities, and this kind of scope of permissions can have a great potential to be kind of disastrous. So in wrong hands, this more permissions can cause even a disaster. So it's about also setting monitoring can help to detect anomalies or something out of ordinary in timely manner to properly take care of any potential problems and take also immediate action when it's kind of required. So why to focus on privileged roles? So just imagine a person who has wide permissions, so global admin in Azure, and this person will definitely be able to cause a greater harm because the larger surface of environment this person has kind of permissions to, in comparison to, for example, just a person with reader permission. Definitely, this reader permission person can kind of fetch some data or leak some data which are sensitive, but it's of course leaking the data with a person with administrative privilege. This person can kind of cut all kind of infrastructure from accessing the environment, can delete all the data and can cause kind of a greater harm than this person with lower permission. That's why here a focus on really monitoring the privilege roles, monitoring what is happening, because the greater harm can happen from privilege roles. And last but not least, remediation, just enough permission. So as you've heard probably about the zero trust, just imagine having a regular user and super admin. So one person is accountant and second is account manager, and second is a lawyer. And of course, this person who is a lawyer doesn't require to have a super admin permissions, but maybe even this lawyer person has kind of a knowledge about the system, but there is no need for lawyer to have kind of super administrative privileges in environment because it's not his daily duties. So he is mostly responsible for preparing the stuff related to his area of work. So even though having knowledge about the systems, maybe due to some hobbies or kind of previous competences, this person doesn't have for first the context, and this person is not kind of responsible for taking care of a system, but someone else. So just enough permissions is about ensuring that you are having a set of rights to take care of your job. So this was all the mistakes I unfortunately will be able to cover today. So as I mentioned, let's go to the summary. And for the summary, I would like to cover some real-life example from 2018. And in 2018, hackers have accessed one of Tesla's Amazon cloud accounts and use it to run their cryptocurrency mining software. The initial point of entry for Tesla Cloud Bridge was unsecured administrative console for Kubernetes. The hackers had infiltrated the Tesla's Kubernetes console, which was unfortunately not password protected. And within one of the Kubernetes pods, that they accessed the credentials, they were exposed credentials to AWS environment, and it contained also Amazon S3 bucket, and this bucket contained really sensitive vehicle telemetry data. And to add to this, to the key points, the attack was well concealed. So the attackers hid malware behind the IP of security firm Cloudflare. They also configured a mining software, but to use a non-standard port. So they reached to the internet, but they connected through unlisted semi-public endpoints and not via well-known mining pools. And also, most likely, the attackers ratcheted down the number of CPU being used just to don't draw any kind of suspicions while mining was being done. So based on the talk, based on the mistakes that I covered, and this kind of different pillars, we can see what lessons learned can be taken from this particular example. So first of all, there was really lax security control. So no password protection, S3, which was unprotected, and no stringent controls over sensitive data. So they really had some limits and really opened the doors for these malicious activities. Additionally, the monitoring strategies. So we know that ratcheted down CPU may not draw any suspicions in the kind of really arrays per CPU to be noticeable. However, for example, the cost monitoring can detect unexpected spending, or security monitoring may sense some anomalous behavior happening in environment. Additionally, tagging and compliance, this aspect I also mentioned. So maybe in case tags will be set and resources won't be labeled properly, it may draw also attention of people that something is happening. And maybe what I mentioned as one of remediation is going one step further with automation, with kind of this automated checks to deny deployment of resources without proper tags being set. Maybe this will limit some scale of this attack. And network, so how easy it was to move and sniff around what was happening. Last but not least, also monitoring of privileged identity may help in detecting. After all, they have accessed Kubernetes console with elevated privileges, so administrative privileges. So this special Duker definitely can help here. Fortunately for Tesla, no sensitive data, according to official sources, of course, was leaked. Mostly, it was just their environment and resources were just used for crypto mining. So we reached the last part of today's agenda. So what's next? As Henry Ford said, the only real mistake is the one from which we learn nothing. So learn from your mistakes, but also leverage mistakes from others, which brings me to the point where I would like to share about my book. So if you are interested in learning more about the cloud mistakes, I've written the book, Mind the Gap, Most Common Cloud Mistakes, and it's kind of a culmination of all the years I spent working in IT and observing the evolution of private cloud. And truth be told, these mistakes can happen to really anyone. And most mistakes I cover in my book or discuss them. I are based on my own observation, personal experiences, and consultations and dialogues I've had over the years. And with this book, my aim is to help you to learn from mistakes of others, but also strengthen your presence in a public cloud. So this was the last part of this presentation and what I wanted to share. So I wanted to thank you for attending. I hope it was interesting for you and you've learned something. And do you have maybe any questions regarding the presentation or regarding the cloud, which I may try to answer and see how successfully I will be?